Hi, I'm Casey Fatchett, and you're listening to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. On this episode, I'm going to talk about how you can use topics in the news to expand the reach of your content and get more clients. And I'm going to talk about Game of Thrones. Yeah, it's a little bit nerdy. It's in both the business side of things and in discussing the actual show and where things went. But more about that after this short break. Hey, photographers. Are you concerned about Adobe discontinuing all the old versions of their apps? Are you tired of paying a subscription every month? Maybe you should check out Luminar. Luminar is a image editing software very similar to Lightroom. Allows you to use presets, libraries, batch edit photos. You can check it out at nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Luminar. That's nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Luminar, Luminar. And if you use the discount code NERDYPHOTO, all caps, NERDYPHOTO, NERDYPHOTO, you'll get $10 off the price. And you may think, oh, $10 off. It's only like $70 to start with. I think it's only like $60 with the $10 off. And like I said, one-time purchase, no monthly subscription fees. So again, head over to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/Luminar and check it out. First off, no spoilers for Game of Thrones whatsoever in this section of the podcast. I will let you know when I start talking about the show. Uh, so, whether or not you watched Game of Thrones, you've probably been bombarded with stories on social media about the final season of the show, as well as reactions from fans and the cast, and pretty much everybody on the entire planet, and what they thought of Game of Thrones, including people saying, I never watched Game of Thrones, I haven't watched a single episode. Whatever. But why are there so many articles? Because the show, whether you like it or not, is pretty much a cultural phenomenon. Millions and millions of viewers, and everyone has an opinion, and more than a few million have their own theories and ideas, and they recut scenes and talk about the books and how the story should have been handled. But what does that all mean? That means that they're already invested in the content. They care about that show. They care about the books. They care about the stories. And how do you use that investment to help your business? By doing a little thing called newsjacking. What newsjacking is you hijack a topic in the news to give yourself more exposure. Why does it work? Well, there are a few different reasons. One is if a content is related to a topic that's getting a lot of media attention or attention on social media, it's going to get more exposure on those various social media algorithms and search engine algorithms because it's a topic that gets searched for a lot. It's just popping up. It's just a law. It's not the law of averages, but it's how the algorithms work. As you might have noticed that if you reacted to something on Facebook, for example, you'll start getting these like, this is similar to posts that you've interacted with. So if you have, for example, again, Game of Thrones, if you've liked some Game of Thrones posts, you're more likely to see new Game of Thrones content, related to content. And also, people who see those things, see articles or posts or photos, whatever, videos, they're more likely to click, read, share, watch, and otherwise engage with that content because they are already attached to it. Like I said before, they're emotionally attached to the topic, whether it's a movie or TV show, whether it's a song, certain holidays, illnesses, cancer research, things like that, generate a huge emotional attachment that will entice people into clicking and sharing. And that's why every website right now has a Game of Thrones section because they drive clicks and engagement. They have to have a story of some sort to drive more clicks, more engagement. And before I start talking about examples of how I've used this in the past, I want to say that most, or maybe all of my examples that I'm going to use have to do with TV shows and movies. But doing this does not have to be a TV show or a movie, what you're working off of. You can do this with really any big newsworthy topic, holidays, a popular song, dance that everybody's doing, trends that are taking off. As long as you can make the topic resonate with your ideal audience, That's what matters. I'm actually doing it a bit right now by discussing Game of Thrones, but hey, it's topical. It's going to resonate with my audience, nerdy photographer. I am a nerd. I do love fantasy books, and we're going to get into that a little bit more later after this part of the podcast. Now, there are two ways to go about newsjacking: on the fly or planning it out well in advance. I've used both of these techniques to very good effect for my photography business in the past, and now I'm going to talk about each approach and how you go about doing it. When you're doing on-the-fly newsjacking, that's when you notice that something is getting everybody's attention. People are talking about it. It's getting shared a lot. Everybody's talking about it. Like, for example, the ALS, the Ice Bucket Challenge, that starts, picking up steam. You see it starting to happen. But you don't have time to really, at that point, plan a huge sort of like campaign around this topic. But you want to kind of jump in and get some traction for your own social media marketing, whatever you're doing. You want more people to see what's going on with you. So you want to create something that is related to this other topic in the news. I've done this successfully in the past with listicles about planning your wedding. And as a wedding photographer, it helps because people are always interested in trying to find better ways to plan their wedding. I used it with TV shows when there were big moments coming up with TV shows and what lessons those shows could teach you about wedding planning. And listicles are pretty easy and quick to create. So that if you notice, like, everybody loves the TV show, if you know something about it, you watch it, whatever, if you can manage to create a little listicle about that show, it can help a lot. They're generally kind of fluffy, so you don't have to spend a huge amount of time creating them, which makes it really perfect for an on-the-fly trend. I had a lot of success with this approach by creating a list of wedding planning lessons that you could learn from the TV series Breaking Bad. Now, that might not seem like the most obvious connection to make, Breaking Bad to wedding planning, but that's also kind of what helps it stand out. And as a wedding photographer, it was pretty easy as knowing the show to come up with some things that I thought were very relatable. If you watch the show and you're planning your wedding, you're like, oh, yeah, that's definitely a mistake I don't want to make. And I wrote it out just before the final season started. There was a lot of talk about the final season coming up. I saw a lot of people talking about the show. It's like, all right, I know the show. It's time to just sit down, bang out a quick little article. We'll see how it goes. So I'm not investing too much time in it, but I think that this is something that people are going to be talking about. And that blog post that I wrote was then picked up by Bridal Guide, and then the Huffington Post, and then by dozens of other news outlets after it was on the Huffington Post. Were reposting it, and it was getting my name out there, got a lot of attention. And it worked because I was able to leverage my knowledge of the series into a humorous yet insightful look at planning a wedding. So people who knew the show would laugh and enjoy that moment and would share it with other people. Really got my name out there. It didn't take a lot of preparation. I wrote the entire thing in about maybe an hour and spent a couple of days promoting it before it just took off on the hype wave surrounding Breaking Bad. Did it lead to a bigger audience? Absolutely. But if you're planning something huge, like you want to really make something get a lot of attention, you're probably going to have to plan further out to get an even bigger impact. And when I say plan further out, I'm talking about 6 months or a year. Why? Because to reach further with your content, you're probably going to want to partner with a publication to get that content published in the first place. With that listicle I wrote about Breaking Bad and wedding planning, it just happened to get picked up. That was great. That was part of its virality, was getting picked up by other people. But it would have immediately a bigger impact if it was exclusive to that publication to start with, and they're sharing it and it's getting a lot of attention from them. They're also involved. They're partnering with you to have this content for something that they know is going to get people, again, to share, comment, watch, click, listen, whatever. But with most publications, you have to understand that they have what's called an editorial calendar, especially around big things like holidays, or, for example, if you're wanting to create a styled photo shoot for Valentine's Day, for example, and you have some sort of interesting take on this, and you want to use the attention of Valentine's Day to get this, you know, to get this content to take off and for people to see your photos, you're probably gonna have to start submitting that to major blogs, or if you're talking print publications like magazines, even earlier than longer than 6 months out, because that's when they make their decisions. A lot of magazines will make decisions uh, 6 to 12 months ahead of time on things like that. You're talking about major blogs of any kind in any industry. You're talking with like hundreds of thousands of followers. Probably the same thing. They're probably deciding on that content 6 months beforehand. Um, if you want a smaller audience, you can probably do it closer up to the date of it happening, but that's not what you're trying to do, right? You're trying to get this out there and have people get a lot of attention. I had a friend who wanted to submit a Christmas themed styled shoot to a major wedding blog, and he sent it to them in November, and they told him that they had already chosen their content and gotten everything ready for Christmas in July. Like, seriously, 6 months, 5 to 6 months ahead of time. They had it all already written and set up, and if there were anything they needed to change, they could go back and make minor adjustments. So if you're choosing content 6 months ahead of time, how long before that should you, as the photographer, be planning the shoot or whatever you're doing? Probably another 3 to 6 months at least. Why? Because the first publication you send it to might not want it, and then that puts you in alerts like, oh, I got to submit it somewhere else. Be sure you tell them that you're giving them a set amount of time to decide on whether or not they want to publish it. Like, give them, a couple of weeks to, like, hey, I'm going to give you 2 weeks for this to make a decision on this exclusive content, or 1 week if that's it. Like, I'm going to give you 1 week if you want exclusivity on this, so that you don't end up putting all of your eggs in one basket and this content doesn't get picked up by somebody because you spent all this time on it. You may, 6 months is not a hard and fast rule, but, like, I'm just saying, you're gonna have to plan ahead. My biggest success in this type of newsjacking came from partnering with The Knot, which is a huge wedding publication, and I created 3 styled shoots, one of which covered Game of Thrones, another one covered True Blood, and the other one was The Hunger Games. Now, I've been seeing all of like some styled shoots here and there, and all of these articles on blogs about wedding inspiration based on these shows and books, and I thought, hey, those really aren't very romantic topics. Um, you can fight me with that on if you want to fight me on that. Feel free. Will tell you my opinions on all of that stuff. But I just don't think that there's a lot of romance in to be inspiring you. Whether it's something you enjoy is different. But don't tell me about love stories and how much these are love stories, because all right. Leave me a comment, whatever. Hit me up on Twitter or Facebook or Instagram, and we'll talk. So what I ended up doing were these sort of anti-hero, anti-inspiration shoots. It was awesome, but I had to start planning those shoots way out in advance of when we were going to get this stuff published, because they wanted to see the pictures and stuff before they made the final decision as to whether or not it was going to get published, and it was all going to come out just before there was a new season of True Blood and the Game of Thrones, and the Hunger Games movie was coming out, and it was just like, they wanted to release it just before all that stuff happened, because there was, some hype building up. So I had to plan, shoot and edit all of these styled sessions before it was going to get published. And the key with the planning long-term newsjacking is, you have to have a really solid planning session. You have to have everything planned. Otherwise, if something goes wrong, then you're not going to hit that deadline, and you're not going to get as much traction. If you don't get it out there at the right time or in the right window of time when the hype is high, it won't get shared as much. Now, the key to planning long-term newsjacking is to find a topic that really resonates with the type of people you want seeing your content, the kind of people who are going to hire you. If you're doing this to hire you, click on what you like. Do the people who are going to do what you want your client to do. Buy something, click on something, listen to something, whatever it is. You have to do it at the right time. Find the topic that's going to mean something to them. The people who really love The Office, is there an Office reunion coming up? Is there some sort of Office marathon? Whatever. Find people. Find the things that people that your audience cares about. That's the big thing. And B, the right publication to partner with. Something that those people are going to read or follow or pay attention to, because if it's coming both from you and from that publication, there's more chances of it getting in front of their faces. And finally, C, you have to find the right release time to capitalize on that hype that builds around the topic that you're hijacking from the news, and you want to adjust appropriately as you approach that release date in case the story changes, because there might be some slightly better angles to use as far as and if you're just taking pictures, if you're not writing an article or some sort of information, if some other publication is writing it, they'll take care of that. But you should also be paying attention, and you maybe shoot off an email saying like, hey, maybe it'd be great to mention this angle of things as you're getting closer to it, and like as the media attention on the topic changes, if it changes. Okay, so that's how you newsjack to get more attention for your content. Go out there, try it. I suggest doing some like sort of on-the-fly stuff. If you see something coming up that is important to your potential client base, whatever it is, it doesn't have to be photography. It could be anything. It could be blogging, whatever. Use that technique of take something from the news and using it to get more attention. And now, after the break, I'm going to talk about the last few seasons of Game of Thrones. There could potentially be some harsh language. There will definitely be a lot of spoilers once we come back after this break. Hey, are you worried about having the right contract to protect your photography business? Do you deal with second shooters and associate photographers, and you want to cover all the bases and make sure that you've got everything locked up tight with your contracts? You can head over to nerdyphotographer.com and check out our selection of boilerplate contract templates for you to use. Okay, I'm going to summarize my Game of Thrones thoughts. I recorded my reactions, thoughts, etc., before, and it turned into a half-hour rant, and it just kept going, and I was like, people are probably going to want to listen to this after listening to another 20 minutes before this, so maybe I'll put that out as a separate recording if anybody wants to listen to that later. So, here goes, and there's bound to be some spoilers in here if you haven't watched the show, so I'll pause, and again. If you don't want spoilers, stop now. Moving on. So, here goes. I am very conflicted in regards to the ending of Game of Thrones. Not just the last season or the finale, the last 3 seasons. Now, visually, the show has been phenomenal. I watched the documentary behind the scenes, just the attention to detail and the set building and costumes and everything that went into that, with the exception of a few mistakes that they made in the last season with their, the Starbucks cup and the water bottles. People were probably tired. And don't start with me on the Battle of Winterfell episode, because it looked fine on my TV. It wasn't too dark. You need to calibrate your settings. The problem that I have with the last 3 seasons, and especially the final season, is they sacrificed depth for spectacle. You don't need everything to be a huge Hollywood production. Sure, having those epic moments is very exciting And people say, oh, spring makes the world very real. You know what made that world very real was that it was a world and it had all of this depth and all of these things that influence people. There are a lot of people who feel that the character development and the symbolism and all of the institutions and things that were built into this very rich world that made people who they are sort of got tossed right out of the window once they went past the books. And there's actually a really great article in Scientific American that explains why a lot of people are really upset with the show. I really recommend you read it. It's called The Real Reason Fans Hate the Last Season of Game of Thrones in Scientific American. Go check it out. And to sum it up, it states that the departure from the way the story was being presented in the books, and that's how it was pretty much presented seasons 1 through 5, is that it switches from a sociological point of view to a psychological point of view. Now, what does that mean? Well, people are more than just their own personal thoughts and motivations, right? There are societal influences, things like religion, and there are several religions in Game of Thrones. The Crown, the kingdom itself, the Night's Watch, duty, honor, etc., etc., etc. These were motivating factors for a lot of decisions in the first 5 seasons of the show. Then, when the show passed the books, those types of motivations stopped mattering so much. It seemed like, we got into these instead of having these, conflicted moments of, what am I supposed to do? Because I have this duty to, this thing and a duty to this thing, and which one wins out, or is it my own personal thoughts and feelings on this matter? Those sorts of things, those conflicts kind of went out the window for more like very straightforward person against person, group against group, conflicts. And even in the final episode, there's a callback to a line from Maester Aemon where he said, "Love is the death of duty," and Tyrion says that maybe the opposite is also true. Duty is the death of love. And that's very deep when you think about it in terms of this show, these books, these stories. Think of Ned Stark. Duty is the death of love. Duty is also, he goes to his death, because of his duty. All these things, that's a very intriguing and rich thing to think about in terms of this, but it really doesn't matter because they didn't dive into that at all in the last few seasons. They just like, oh, hey, look at the dragon with burning stuff. Isn't that great? Because think about it, Jon's duty at the end. Who is Jon? Jon has conflicting duties. At the very end of this show, we throw in his love for Dany out the window. He has conflicting duty to family, Dany, and the Starks, both family to him. So that's kind of crazy. Like, who is he more? Who does he side with? That's a conflict. His duty to the kingdom and the people who, Daenerys is going to just burn to ashes, or his duty to his queen. He's, pledged his fealty to her. So again, there's a lot of conflicts here. How does he make this decision? He doesn't. All he says though is, "She is my queen." It's like there's obviously something going on in your head, but it's not coming out. We don't really hear much about it. Just because he says, "Oh, she's my queen." But duty is such an enormous issue in these stories. And conflicts of duty influence so many decisions. Why did they shorten the last 2 seasons? If they put in another 2 episodes in each one, they could have fleshed out these conflicts that the characters have. That would involve complex writing, and that can be really difficult when you've been having 5 seasons and the script's pretty much pre-written, and all you had to do was kind of cut and rewrite things here and there and consolidate some stuff. Just adjust what George R. R. Martin had already written for you. They could have put some meat on the bones of that plot instead of just going like, we're going to go straight to this thing. And we're just going to ignore the symbolism of the White Walkers that we've created for 8 seasons, and now we're just going to right to the end. And I'm going to say I'm not upset about where we ended up. That's fine. The story goes where it goes. I'm not, complaining about that. It's how we got there. And I also have to add in, while people tend to think that Tyrion is sort of like the centerpiece of the story, I personally am starting to think that it's Varys. Because, he keeps saying, I serve the kingdom. I don't serve this one person or another person. I serve the kingdom. The writers should have done the same thing. Serve the kingdom, and everything else sort of falls into place. That's how the pieces get moved to one another. Unfortunately, they didn't. They served the characters to the audience without the motivations and backgrounds that they had spent all of this time building up, and that's why it felt unsatisfying in the end. If you want to hear more about my thoughts and feelings on this, I will release my half an hour Game of Thrones rant soon.
Well, you better start listening, 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 better start listening.
And now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
And in useless information for this episode, in ancient Rome, urine was commonly used as a tooth whitener. Yes, to repeat that again, urine was commonly used as a tooth whitener.
Well, you better start listening, better start listening, better start listening, better start listening, better start listening.
That is all for this episode. Thanks for listening. Please follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts. Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Radio.com, YouTube, Google Play, and please leave a review. You can also email me at info@nerdyphotographer.com. Tell me the types of things you want to hear about. Also, follow along on Twitter and Instagram @TheNerdyPhoto. Want to be a guest on the podcast or know someone who should be a guest on the podcast? Let me know. Leave a comment on social media. Send me a message. Shoot me an email. I want to know. Thanks for listening. Stay nerdy.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.